Welcome to the systems perspective. This is one of the first theories of human behavior that strayed away from like a solely psychiatric person, internal functioning perspective. And it started to dabble its fingers in to looking at the world and the environment around an individual and how society as a whole is organized into systems and how all of those system interactions influence behavior and how they're all kind of essentially interrelated parts. So kind of the YouTube video clip, I don't know which order you're watching this in, if you watch the YouTube first or if you watch this, but the YouTube video kind of reflects back to like the solar system. So you have this giant system, but there's different parts of the solar system, the Milky Way, the planets, other things. I do not know astronomy very well, but it's kind of that concept that there's all these moving pieces to form one big system. So the key points in the systems perspective is that there's interrelated members and altogether they constitute an ordered whole. I'm going to quick flip to the next slide just because it gives a visual. This visual is also in the book, but I took it upon myself to make it the visual also be in PowerPoint in color form. So you can see that there's all these interrelated parts. So there's different pieces. There's the school, a family, a work, community, but they all are part of this whole for your client's system in their community or their specific environment. So if we go back to this one, each part of the system impacts all other parts in the system as a whole. So if something is going on in school, because of all of these inputs and outputs and the feedback loops, they have the direct ability to impact different aspects of a person's system. All systems are subsets of larger systems. That picture and graph demonstrates that pretty well. Systems maintain boundaries, which give them identities. This is a super, super, super important concept in the systems perspective, is that each piece of the system has a boundary, which gives its identity and gives it kind of that organization. So we'll talk about like formal organizations and social structures. Social structures kind of create those boundaries. So society defines what the role and the parameters of school are. So K through 12, it's from this time to this time during the day. And so school operates, the people, like all these individual players in the school system, stay within their boundary, but the school system then as a whole impacts the other ones. Not necessarily this little dude right here might not directly impact family, but the system of a school directly impacts. So boundaries and knowing and clearly defining the roles of the system is a very important piece in systems perspective. The dynamic interactions within, between, and among systems produce stability and change, sometimes even rapid and dramatic change. So this could be some sort of, let's say, if we go back to school, if there is a school shooting, well, that's going to directly change the environment of a community. Safety protocols, the feelings of safety, families wanting to send their kids to school, parents not wanting to go to work because they can't send their kids to school because the school environment has to be cleaned up from the casualties. And so different events can influence very quickly a system. As you can see on here, this is demonstrating a open system. So sometimes systems can be closed, which means nothing is coming in. Things are only coming out, but they also can have, if it's an open system, influences can come from outside of the context to influence behavior as well. Strengths and weaknesses of this perspective, it's popular because it can be used at any level of social work. You can do it on individuals, on families, and groups. When you take individuals and families class, we actually create genograms on ourselves. We don't do an echo map, but those are like very specific clinical tools where you map the systems and look at their influences. Organizations often do systems mapping to kind of see all the different players, funding sources, and community needs. So that goes to kind of the macro piece as well. It's helpful for understanding behavior, not necessarily creating interventions or direct services from behavior. It's more of like that data collection and kind understanding your client system on a deeper level. And it's really devoted to holism because you're looking at the whole picture. Some of the weaknesses is that it is a little vague and somewhat ambiguous because you're just kind of like looking at things and observing. So it's not necessarily a very directive perspective in theory, but you are collecting really good information. So that does make it hard to have measurable variables for research. And if you are looking at systems as being closed, that can be viewed as oppressive towards those who lack power within the system. So it has to be very intentional in how you look at it and how you incorporate it in order to not view players of the system or players outside of the system even as marginal or less than or somewhat defective because they're not part of the system. So there you have it, systems perspective in under 6 minutes.